Welcome back, everybody. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And in this case, it is a special day because Hannah has been watching, following along, engaging, and she has a question that we're going to tackle. Hannah, I think we first met through doing some political fundraising, if I'm not mistaken, DNC and otherwise. Yep. And now Hannah's the chief of staff at Zinc Collective, which is a political startup. And she's asking this really central question about career design that a lot of people think about in the beginning. So Hannah, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So my question is, I am early in career. How do I avoid being pigeonholed as a generalist while having different career experiences? And I really came to this because I was told all in the beginning stages of my career when I was an intern, like, you have to make yourself indispensable, and you do that by filling whatever need exists. And so I'm getting to this part where, I'm still early in career, but I'm thinking about like what the future of my career looks like. And I start reading these blogs by these tech founders, and I'm seeing them talk poorly about being a generalist early in their career. So one of them even said, like, you will end your career and you will become a master of none quickly. And it was very harsh, and it was very, this is not advice, I will say. But it did get me thinking, like, am I going down the wrong path? Should I be picking a special or, an expert area for myself now, or do I have time,
Yeah, I mean, so my perspective on this comes from, so now we invest in plenty of tech startups. That's what we do. But as you know, like, I worked in government and nonprofit and at professional services and media, big corporate. Like, if you could design a messier early career, I don't know how you would possibly do it. And I had this problem myself, which the problem for me expressed in the following way, which is, and it is a problem to resolve. So let's just acknowledge that there is some legitimacy to the problem. The problem is, what if I want to do something and it's not straightforward for the people I might need to convince to let me do that with them, to hire me? What if it's not straightforward for them to hire me because I don't have an obvious match in terms of the skills that I need? So that's the problem to overcome. Now, let's just talk about all kinds of ways that I could see it going wrong. People, like, there's this thing in software about premature optimization being the root of all evil. I think premature specialization in careers can often be. I mean, how many people do you know who went to law school thinking they'd be a lawyer, spent all this time? They're like, well, I guess the legal training was kind of valuable, but I don't know if I want to be a lawyer. And let alone even more specific occupations. And I don't believe there's any such thing as wasted time, because it all contributes to like what we learn as a human being. And, if I could have had a more linear career path, it would have been better in a lot of ways. Like, I might have started a company sooner. I might be a lot wealthier now. I don't know. Like, I often feel like I got into this game late, but I also wouldn't be the person who I am. I wouldn't have, like, I met my wife working in government. Like, there's all these things. And so I don't believe in over-engineering your path. And I don't think there is any such thing, I've never seen it, of a talented person who is stuck in a cul-de-sac because they specialize too late. What might end up happening is, and by the way, like, why is that? It's because how do real career transitions happen? It's like, well, I sat next to this person for a month and it turned out we became best friends, and then they started a company and I went to, so because luck is such a big factor in career design, it's really hard to over-engineer. And so the way I think about it instead is, when should you begin when should a person begin specializing? Yes, this is not advice because I'm not telling you what to do. And, I don't really know what anybody else should do. But the way I think about it is, there's a moment in your career that, I don't have a good name for this, but let's just call it the hypothesis moment. And at that moment, you become aware of a hypothesis for a way you'd like the world to change and a way in which you would like to be involved in that personally. So for me, that moment arrived, a few years into the tech industry, which is, I'd like to see the future of work be more inclusive of everybody and more productive and just better in a bunch of ways. And my way of participating in that is by being a startup investor. That ended up happening by accident. I didn't prepare to be an investor. But let's say you realized what you really wanted was to be a startup founder. Then you could say to yourself, okay, well, then you enter the diagnosis phase once you've got the hypothesis of what you want to do, which is, how do I test this? And how do I build the specific skills that will help me do this particular thing? And so until then, I think the goal is learning. And as long as you can solve for things like being around the highest quality people you can, being in the best run organizations you can be in, doing the biggest impact, like that kind of stuff. That's way more important than if you have a legible skill, because you're just as likely to be hired because of a relationship or something like that. And if you discover you want to be a welder and you need a skill being a welder, then go fucking learn how to be a welder for a while. And you might, I guess I'll put it differently, which is the price of being too late to specialize might be needing to go back and acquire some skills that build you up the specialist track. But look, plenty of careers, including mine, have steps backward on pay, steps backward on title, all kinds of stuff. Like when I went from city government to working in a big corporation, I went from a place where everybody knew what I could do and they could have given me a lot of leadership responsibility. I had it, to a place where they were like, I don't know what the hell we do with you. Like, let's drop you in the water and see if you swim. And so I guess I just say, I don't worry about it too much. And the time to specialize is once you have a guess on what kind of thing. The best specializations, and I'll shut up in a second and then I'd love to hear what you think. The best specializations are the ones that emerge from a person's natural interest. And let's just acknowledge there's a lot of privilege in even being able to pursue those interests. Like a lot of people do a thing because they have to do the thing or perceive themselves to have to do the thing. If you discover that it turns out you're really interested in, how AI procedurally generates media, then learn that. And then that's awesome. Maybe you'll find a career doing that. So that's my general framework for thinking about it. I don't know. How does that land?
No, that hits home, definitely hits home. And the thing that I have been trying to do more and more often is just, if there's a course that I can take, if there's like something I can look at that can give me an insight into what another industry looks like, I've been taking all those opportunities. And it is so, because I have only ever worked in the political industry, it is interesting seeing that like any job title that we have in this industry almost always has a matching one in another industry. And that's been really helpful for me to realize, like, maybe it doesn't seem that I have direct experience in X, Y, and Z different roles, but like I technically have, if I've done this and this on a campaign.
100%. And I think that, I think there's a couple of really powerful insights in there. One is the things you learn in one domain transfer to another domain. The other is you find yourself following your interests. I mean, like I was speaking of political stuff. I was yesterday looking at courses for learning how to be a better organizer. I take a drawing class. Do I think I'm going to be an artist? No. But we're going to learn as a team how to use Replit, which is one of our portfolio companies. We did a whole, so there's that genuine learning. But then there is another problem, and I realize this isn't the direct question, but just to name it, which I call the translation problem, which is you've learned in politics, let's say, how to do sales. You didn't call it that. You called it fundraising, but it's sales. And I mean, getting somebody in a different domain to be willing to do translation, usually people aren't willing to do that. It's too risky for them. And so you have to find a way. And I think the most common way people try to overcome that as candidates is through explanation. Let me tell you why. The thing I did here is just like this thing here. And that's not really the point. Because the point isn't that they don't believe you. It's that if they hire you and they're wrong, it's much worse for them than if they hire somebody who's more obviously a fit. So you got to figure out ways to reduce the risk to them. And that could be like, hire me without a title for a month. It could be drop me in for, and let me sell alongside you in a meeting and you can see what I can do. But you're really not trying to solve the mind problem of do they believe the skills translate? You're trying to solve the risk problem of if it isn't obvious to others why they should hire you, given your political experience, how do you make it more obvious? And that could be relationships or a bunch of other things. And then I just want to say what you're going to say, and then I'll bring up this comment that we got.
Well, I was just thinking, how do you even get, because in a lot of those situations, they wouldn't even take a meeting with you. They wouldn't even take an interview with you. So how do you even get through that?
Yes.
Like, how do you even get your foot in the door?
Yes. I mean, the answer to that, and again, this is talking about like information industry jobs is, sorry, I'm going to bring this up in a second. I keep bringing it up and hiding it, is you have to figure out a way to hack the system. And that could be a relationship. And if it's not a relationship, then you better write the best cover letter that has ever been written that shows deep thought about that company. You have to overcome it in some other way. And that's painful and expensive in the short term. But in the long term, it totally pays off. But you have to imagine yourself in the shoes of the recipient. Why would they take this resume that doesn't seem like a perfect fit? You have to give them a reason, a really stinking obvious reason, because they're not going to think about it. I mean, I often, when people send me a resume or a pitch deck, I'll be like, look, let me show you how I actually review this. Look. Okay, I'm done. And they're like, wait, that's it? It's like, yeah, I got what I needed to get. And, for a little bit of reassurance, Ilya, who has been a generous and frequent member of this community, has this thing about that Steve Jobs says that you can connect the dots, but only backwards, which to me is really reassuring. I mean, it wasn't until I'd had all these different experiences myself that I realized that the thread that I cared about that happened to travel through them, I was happy to drop any threads because, sunk cost at that point was making work better for people.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Cooking
I think,
40s.
yeah. And I think the other thing that's difficult is it's a lot easier to come from an industry other than politics to politics. It's a lot easier for people to want to make that transition, but it's a lot easier for people to accept people from the political industry. There seems to be just a bit of a translation gap that people don't understand how similar it is to what people do at a regular startup.
I think that's right, because they're just unfamiliar with it. And, I remember I had that coming from government, but the disadvantage is people will struggle to understand. The advantage that compensates for that is you'll have experiences that are really rare. Like when I tell people, actually, the pace in a political campaign is faster than at a startup, they sometimes really just don't believe me, but it's way faster, even though startups are really fast. And I didn't even work on a campaign. I mean, I've helped campaigns, but I worked in government. Even that, like City Hall in New York was way faster than most startups. People just don't believe it. So here's two unconventional paths. Something I've written about a little bit about like messy careers and the value of them. And Hannah, I would just love any other questions you have anytime. You would be welcome back. So thank you.
I will definitely take you up on it.
Yay. All right. To be continued.